I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and on today's episode, I'm going to explain exactly why, if I had about 150 grand to blow on a compact sports sedan, it wouldn't be an AMG C63, it wouldn't be an M3, I reckon it'd be one of these. With me today is the refreshed 2021 Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. And if you can't tell it's the updated model from the outside, that's fine, because the changes are very subtle. In fact, there's almost no changes under the skin either, because what Alfa Romeo concentrated on was our biggest problem with the car as it initially hit the market, and that was interior fit and finish. Put simply, the Giulia's cabin is an attractive place, but it wasn't screwed together quite as well as key rivals from BMW, Mercedes-AMG or Audi, and that's exactly what the changes are designed to rectify for 2021. So, in today's video, we'll check out whether or not that interior is a more livable place. And that is important when you're spending over 6 figures on any car, but particularly one that's designed to do double duty, both as a super sedan, but also something that you can put your colleagues or mother-in-law into, and they won't really know what it's all about. And then of course, we'll take the Giulia Quadrifoglio for a drive and remind ourselves of exactly why this super sedan is so brilliant. Partially it's about the engine, a 2.9 litre twin-turbo V6 that makes 375 kilowatts of power and sends it straight to the rear wheels. But partially it's about just how beautifully damped the Giulia Quadrifoglio is, making it an absolutely perfect partner for Australian backroads and more livable than an AMG C63 day to day. But before we get to that point, we're going to jump into the cabin and check that out. And before we do that, if you haven't subscribed, do so below the video. Jumping inside the Giulia Quadrifoglio, we get to see exactly what Alfa Romeo were talking about when they said they focused the improvements for 2021 on better fit and finish and interior construction. Broadly, the design in here is pretty much the same as the pre-facelift car, and that's okay because I actually quite like the way the Giulia looks and is laid out inside. It's quite logical. We've got physical controls for things you'd want it for, like the fan, temperature, to control the screen here, volume, and of course the drive modes. And we've got a good smattering of controls on the steering wheel without putting too much in there like the AMG C63. But there is still modern technology, 2 good screens. Yes, it's definitely not as involved as an Audi RS4, but I think they've got it to a good level where the technology isn't sort of taking over the whole experience. But what this is all about is this. No movement. These controls here, the damping is much nicer than before. They've basically made it heavier. This control in particular, the rotary dial that controls this screen here, was really horrible before. It just felt cheap, like something you'd ordered off eBay. It now finally has decent weighting. Same with the drive mode switch. The volume is still a bit not as nice as an Audi one, but it's a little better. So all in all, it's just about these things that you touch all the time being nicer. Gear shifter as well. Steering wheel is still a really lovely piece, however. This car, which is essentially a base Giulia Quadrifoglio, is 7 grand cheaper than it was last year, and that's despite the improvements you get. But it means its particular example isn't optioned up to the max with performance parts outside or in. So we don't have the carbon ceramic brakes, for example, we don't have the Sparco racing bucket seats, and we don't have the carbon steering wheel, and all of that is exactly what I want because the Giulia is totally fine by default. We have this nice leather steering wheel, you still get little Alcantara inserts just where you'd want them, but most of the time you're sort of touching the leather as opposed to the Alcantara. We do have the engine start-stop switch on the steering wheel. That sparked a total revolution in the industry. You see them on MGs now, but Alfa were kind of the first to reboot that concept. And then absolutely luscious paddle shifters. Very early on, you could get a left-hand drive Giulia Quadrifoglio with a manual. That stopped pretty quickly. It's now auto only. But thankfully, the paddles are good, and the ZF gearbox is really snappy, as we'll find out in a sec. Lovely analog gauges with a square digital screen, digital speedo between them. This screen here has new software. It's absolutely fine. It works exactly as you would expect. Nice rotary control for it. The navigation looks good. The audio sounds good through the Harman Kardon speakers. The phone call quality is fine, so it's exactly what you would need in a car like this. And then the standard seats in the Giulia, really beefy bolsters, but the seat itself isn't too tight, so I think it will actually accommodate a range of sizes. And thankfully, finally, for an Alfa, we have extendable thigh support. So if you've got longer legs, this seat isn't going to be too bad. Otherwise, material quality is very nice. We've got leather up here on the dash, green and white stitching, very cool. Leather up here on the doors as well. Leather pretty much everywhere. Real carbon fiber is the trim in this car. It is real, so we'll accept it. And in terms of other practicality, we've got a new wireless device charger here, bit of storage, USB-C port, 2 old style USB ports, big cup holders, and a tray ahead of those two. All right, let's take a look in the back. Look, if you're going to buy a Quadrifoglio for the family, you're probably going to go for the Stelvio Quadrifoglio, which is the crossover version of this car. But the good news is that if you want the sedan, and I congratulate you for doing so, the back seat is perfectly serviceable for 2 adults. I wouldn't bother trying to fit a third in because the hump in the floor is enormous and the roofline isn't that high, but contain yourself to thinking of it as a 4-seater and you'll be on the money. So for me, at 6 foot, sitting behind my own driving position, headroom, I've got about 1 inch. Leg room, I've got some. Toe room's pretty tight because this is a big beefy seat and I've got it on the deck, but you could live with it. You could get a couple of people back here, it'd be okay. The same upholstery continues as up front, so we've got leather and Alcantara. Same really nice stitching, so you don't get shortchanged in the back. Same leather finishing up here on the top of the door. And we've got air vents, we've got heating for the outboard seats and 2 more USB ports, bringing the total for the car to 5, which is pretty generous. And then another bottle holder in the doors and map pockets in both seats. So practicality wise, it's really hard to count against the Giulia Quadrifoglio. And then we do have a flip down armrest here. We've got 2 cup holders as well. So you're pretty well stocked in the back of this thing. Jumping back outside the Giulia and here round the back, of course, the business end of where this car does its driving from, a few comments. Firstly, I really like the look of the Giulia, but that's a subjective thing, and I know there's a camp that don't think it's quite as pretty as the 159, and I do see that point as well. But I reckon the Giulia Quadrifoglio just finishes it off really beautifully with its pumped haunches, and of course, just a few quiet additions. In fact, if you're not really an Alfisti, I don't think you're going to know exactly what this car is. It's got a bit of an element of Q car to it. Of course, if you buy it in Alfa Red, it's going to catch more attention. But this car is available in a really nice palette of colors. And I actually think it even carries off the basic Alfa White really, really well. Just looking for those 4-leaf clovers there on the front flanks. Now the Quadrifoglio picks up this carbon spoiler here, lip spoiler, real carbon. And then down the bottom, a really pronounced diffuser with quad tailpipes. They tell you that this thing has got a bit of power running through it. And of course that would be right. And then we have not a power tailgate, but an easy release tailgate here, opening up to reveal a 480 litre boot, which is directly comparable with what you're going to get from Mercedes, BMW, and not Audi at this point, because of course Audi's flagship sports car of this size is the RS4, which is a wagon only. You can buy an RS5 Sportback, which is a large hatchback, but there's no traditional RS4 sedan, nor is there a Giulia Quadrifoglio wagon, sadly. Even though AMG do a C63 wagon, BMW will now be doing an M3 Touring. Alfa Romeo decided not to do an estate car version of the Giulia Q, and I wish they did. That being said, the Stelvio Quadrifoglio is basically that car, and as I discovered when I took it for a hard drive maybe a year or 2 ago, it's pretty darn good as well, and you can watch that video by clicking up here in the top right hand corner. But today, we're here to drive the Giulia Quadrifoglio, and that's where we're going to go now. So, the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio, now with nicer interior, same running gear, same mechanicals, same great driving experience, which is good because nothing really needed to change about the way this Italian sports sedan proceeds down an Australian road. The two really do go hand in hand. You know, you might think of something like a Ferrari as being hugely compromised for running anywhere but an Italian autostrada or a racetrack, and of course you'd be right, but an Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio is a way to distill some of that experience into a car that you really can live with every day. And it starts with the engine. You know, some people call it a cut down Ferrari V12. That doesn't tell the whole story, but what it is impressive in its own right, even without name dropping the prancing horse. So it's a 2.9 litre twin turbocharged petrol V6, a 90-degree V6, producing big numbers. 375 kilowatts of power, 600 newton meters of torque, and like a lot of the best cars in this segment, it's still rear-wheel drive only. You can of course get this powertrain with all drive in the Stelvio Quadrifoglio, which sends heaps of its torque to the rear wheels when you want it to, but in the Giulia, that's where it sends all the torque, because that's the only place it can send it. And as such, what you have here is a very potent, pure driver's car, rear drive, nice big engine up front, but pushed way back against the firewall, so we still have really good crisp turn in. And of course the engine itself weighs much less than the 4-litre twin turbo V8 in the C63, for example. Now it doesn't sound the same, but I think you'll agree the engine doesn't sound too shabby. It's a really exaggerated sort of V6 note up front while you're revving it out. Really nice zingy mechanical noise before you just get these claps on the upshifts and then rev match downshifts. Sounds really good, really engaging. And the good thing is you can make it be a total lout if you want. In its loudest mode, in race mode, it makes a really good peachy noise which you can enjoy on a back road like I am now, or if you want to poodle around the suburbs like that, then be my guest. But the car starts up in what's known as natural mode, and it's really quite quiet. If you drop the hammer and you accelerate rapidly in any mode, it'll still crack the upshifts and be pretty noisy. But you can easily just drive this car around on light throttle and no one's going to pick it really as the Quadrifoglio. There's a bit of a burble from the rear end, but you can be quite social with this car. It's really got two personalities, and the same can be said for the excellent suspension. Now, if I just relax the dampers off here into their soft setting, it's totally livable on this broken up Australian back road, and it's totally livable to daily. I can't say the same for a C63, even though they deliberately made that car softer for its midlife facelift. Well, it was pretty hard before that. It's still pretty hard. BMW M3 has a super stiff rear end. You know, the CS was okay. The Audi RS4 and RS5 are totally sweet. They're even more comfortable than the Giulia Quadrifoglio, but they can't do quite what this car can do dynamically. The chassis balance of the Giulia is superior, and that's why, because of its high-end dynamic capability, but also its livability, this is kind of the car that I think to myself, yeah, if I was shopping in that segment and I wanted something which could really do it all, this is it, apart from having a wagon body. But then it always brings you back to the point that you can get a Stelvio. And then there's the steering, which is, you know, it gets you close to God, the steering of the Giulia Quadrifoglio. This is how a car like this is meant to steer. The rack is quick, it's feelsome. If you see a mid-corner bump, you feel a mid-corner bump. Not in a rack-rattly way, just that there's communication through this electric power steering setup, which is great. Heaps of grip from the Pirelli P0s on this car, but largely the grip in the Giulia Q comes from the fact that it has very high mechanical grip. The chassis stays with you. It doesn't actually want to get out of shape, and you can drive this car to a very high limit without getting it out of shape. And you have to fully commit to shenanigans, and you know it's going to step out, and it goes. But it doesn't step out everywhere. You know, a C63 wants to go sideways all the time, basically. This will do it, but it also wants to help you drive fast and precisely, which is nice. All the while experiencing just terrific steering, lovely response from the front end, a good noise. You know, it's lovely, this thing, just lovely. Handily lighter than a Stelvio, which I also enjoyed driving very much. Lower set, wide, squat, set up properly, lovely steering wheel, good seats. You don't need the Sparcos, these are enough. You don't need the carbon ceramic brakes. The stoppers on this, they're big boys too. They haul up the Giulia Quadrifoglio without a problem, you know, so it's pretty well stocked as it comes, and handily cheaper than many of its rivals. And then when it comes to safety, well, the Giulia isn't a brand new car, so it's not going to have technologies like junction AEB or a center airbag, but we do have frontal AEB, we've got lane keeping, it's pretty good. We've got blind spot monitoring, we've got rear cross traffic alert, and we've got adaptive cruise control, and we have the most woeful reversing camera. I mean, it looks like a dodgy old VHS tape. It's not helpful. No 360-degree camera. We do have parking sensors though that are pretty accurate, and you can kind of tell where the edges of the car is, but because the Quadrifoglio has such pumped haunches, parking it in a really tight spot is still nerve-wracking experience. So those are my detailed impressions of the updated 2021 Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. An update that focused on arguably the least important part of this car, but something that you've got to sit in every day if you buy one. And I reckon that was critical to make the Giulia Quadrifoglio as competitive as possible against key rivals. And I'd like to reiterate what I said at the start because I meant it. If I was shopping in this segment, you're looking at what I'd buy. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I'd love you to leave me a comment and let me know what you think, which car you're interested in most amongst this pack of European supercars, or of course their rivals from anywhere else around the world. While you're there, you can hit subscribe. The controls for all that are coming up on screen now. You can also watch our latest video, or you can watch our Alfa Romeo content from here on the Chasing Cars channel. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.